This is a little boy named Kobe, and my best friend when I lived in Hawaii, after he was born, I was actually roommates with them, so I lived in the back house. And after his 1-year shots, we were all in the living room, and we witnessed Kobe go into a grand mal seizure, tonic-clonic seizure. Scariest day of my life. So we called it, the father was a firefighter, so he called his buddies. A few minutes later, the firefighters break down the door. So it turns out he's having a febrile seizure, right? Pretty common with kids. But that set off a cascade, years of every diagnosis under the sun. And here I am in graduate school studying neuroscience, studying psychology, everything from ADHD and epilepsy and Asperger's, autism. Until he was about 10 years old, a nutritionist, Hawaii doesn't have the best medical care all the time, a nutritionist said, well, he reminds me of a little boy I knew years ago who had ALD, adrenoleukodystrophy. If you remember, you guys are a young audience, but years ago the movie Lorenzo's Oil that came out, he has that very rare genetic disorder. And so the prognosis wasn't great. It mostly affects boys, and they often don't live past 13 years old. And then if they do, when they get to be 20, it gets a little bit more challenging. It affects all their motor and developmental issues. But I'm so happy to report that last summer I went home to Hawaii and Kobe graduated high school. And so he has some developmental challenges. You can see he's kind of small and real kind of skinny. That's his mom and dad with his little brother on the far right. So he's a little guy and kind of has the mental capacity of about a 10-year-old. So he'll have challenges. But what this really taught me, throughout his lifetime was our brains are dynamic. They're repairable and they're trainable. And there are strategies that we know that we've developed and really enhance that can help you optimize how your brain is performing to help it be even more agile. So here are the 3 objectives that we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about understanding the relationship between your brain chemistry, because you do have a pharmacy in your brain, and how can you activate that, and the relationship with mental energy and emotion. We'll also talk about how storytelling changes that neurochemistry and how you can really direct that change for yourself and for your participants. And lastly, we'll discuss specific tactical, practical strategies that you can leave when you walk out of the store to engage attention using what we know about brain science.
There's so much to do. Where do I start? What's most important? Why is it important? So we hope we cover some of those things in this brief session. So as a quick kind of fun brain warm-up, since you've been doing a lot of thinking this morning already, and Sandy and Jennifer probably talked about analogies and analogical thinking, how that engages frontal lobe. So I want you to think about for a second, how would you describe your brain as a type of transportation? And why would you describe it that way? And just reflect on that for a moment, bring that to mind. And then secondly, what type of transportation would you like your brain to be like, if the first one wasn't your ideal description, and why?
How often do you, on the scale of 1 to 5, from never at a 1 to 5 very often, how often do you just think about your own brain? Who would say never? You never think about your brain. A couple of hands going up, okay. Would anyone say you're on the other end of the spectrum very often? And only a couple there. So majority kind of tends to fall in the middle, like sometimes, occasionally. So the reason we like to ask that is for a couple of reasons. One is we think about brain all day, every day. That's all we do. And people will come up to me after talks like this and say, I never thought about my brain. Never thought about what's in between these ears. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have people coming to us, or if they're thinking about their brain a lot, very often that's from a place of worry or concern. Maybe they've got a kiddo with something neurological, brain-based, ADHD on the autism spectrum, Asperger's, anxiety, depression, right? All these things are brain-based disorders. About 1 in 5 people have something that's generated from the brain not performing optimally. People who come to us who are older are like, I wish I had known this information sooner, because there are things that you can do to protect your brain. And then we also, though, don't want you to be thinking about, coming from a place of worry or fear. How can we alleviate that fear? Because there is so much optimism about what we can do about our brain health.